On Radio 97, our resident lawyer, Despina Priala, of boutique law firm Priala Legal in Runaway Bay, with us at this time every week to offer her legal expertise. She provides some general advice on the latest of hot topics. She has experience that spans more than 25 years in areas including property and commercial law. She also prepares wills as part of estate planning and litigation. With us once again this morning. Hello, Despina.
Good morning, Wayne. Good morning, Brooke.
Good morning, Desi. So this morning we're talking about persons seeking to buy land in Australia, and something big is changing as of tomorrow, the 29th of July. What's the update, Despina?
Okay, so this involves foreign investors. All right, so foreign investors, they've always invested in this country. During COVID, of course, that petered off quite a lot. But what the Albanese government announced as part of their election commitment was to increase the foreign investment fees and penalties. So as of the 29th of July, as you said quite rightly, tomorrow, you've got this new fee structure. So what the Albanese government has done is that they've said, look, we're going to double the application fees that are normally payable by foreign investors when they want to buy property in Australia. Okay, and hopefully that will contribute to the economy and provide some other benefits to Australia. So I thought we'd talk about this a little bit in the context of what's a foreign buyer, very briefly, and what does that mean, but also a little bit unique to the Gold Coast in particular, where we have a few resorts that are actually exempt from all of these, and some people might not be aware of this. So it's quite unique for the Gold Coast.
Yeah, so interesting. Okay, so you go.
That's all right. So let's start off with our foreign buyers. We'll just talk about it briefly so people can understand and get some concept into what we're talking about. So generally, foreign persons do require approval for the Foreign Investment Review Board in foreign investment in Australia before they can buy property. And the government policy there is really to channel the foreign investment into new dwellings, not established dwellings. And what the government has always said is that this is going to create additional jobs in construction, and it'll help support the economic growth of our country if we focus more on new dwellings as opposed to allowing foreign people to buy established dwellings. So dwellings that have been around for years and years and years, not newly built property. So applications for new dwellings are usually not subject to any conditions. In other words, it is pretty much a rubber stamp application. Okay, and they're generally prohibited from buying established dwellings. So that's the general rule. However, you've got temporary residents that are allowed to apply for approval to buy one established dwelling to use as their residence, not as an investment property to rent out. So while they're in Australia, they're allowed to buy one established dwelling. And that's part of the rules, or they can apply to purchase an established dwelling for redevelopment if it's going to boost the Australian housing market. So that's just a little intro into foreign buyers and investors. And of course, we're talking about people that have temporary visas. So they're foreign buyers or foreign investors. We're not talking about people that have permanent residency or indeed that have gained Australian citizenship, because they're not considered foreign buyers. And there's a little unique exemption given to New Zealand citizens that they're not considered foreign buyers, but under certain conditions.
Oh,
okay,
really?
And that's probably another topic for another day. But yes, we have that here in this country. That's just a little intro, as I said, about foreign investors and what they need to do. They need to get approval generally, and then they need to pay application fees as part of their application.
And these application fees, you said, are in fact doubling. Is that correct?
Yes, so the Albanese government has made that commitment, and it's part of their budget revenue. So for the next 4 years, so they've said, okay, well, for example, if normally someone would have to pay an application fee of $6,600, it's going to be $13,200. All right, and that's in recent articles published. So yes, you'll probably hear more about that over the next few years. And now with the borders opening up, COVID's, if we can call it, is finished in terms of lockdowns and restrictions and closing off international borders. Now that they're open again, they've announced this more particularly so they know foreign people will be coming back into the country and investing. Yeah. So whether or not that's a good thing, sounds like it might be a good thing. But I thought we'd talk a little bit about the Gold Coast within the context of this as well.
Because there are some exceptions, aren't there? And the Gold Coast is prime amongst those.
Yes. So what we have in the 80s, we had an interesting act called the Integrated Resorts Development Act. And what that act did is that it actually exempted particular integrated resorts from foreign people having to get approval and to pay application fees. And there are a lot of these resorts that are captured by this particular act. Those resorts, or integrated tourism resorts, I should say, and they had to meet certain criteria as part of being an integrated tourism resort. So they had to provide for certain amenities to be classed as a tourism resort. And there are a lot of them that were formed before September 1999. Okay, and I'll give you a list of those, and 3 of those, for example, are on the Gold Coast. That's very interesting. So if you are buying into these resorts I'm about to mention, you actually are exempt, because the whole resort under this act is exempt from these FIRB rules, meaning a foreign person can come and buy in and not have to get approval or pay application fees. And that really is never going to change.
And why though? Why is it exempt for resorts?
Well, I suppose if you look back to when the Act was formed, and then we're talking about the late 80s, there's a lot of foreign investment back then. Through the 90s, there was obviously generating it from a tourism perspective.
Yeah.
And these were put in place very much and set in stone by the government back then. And that was obviously to promote the use of these tourism resorts for foreign people. So in terms of those ones that are exempt, just on the Gold Coast, for example, we have Hope Island Resort. Right?
Know it, yeah.
You know that pretty well. We have Raw Pines Resort. Yes.
Yeah.
And of course we have Sanctuary Cove, which is at Hope Island. So everybody knows Sanctuary Cove as well. Those 3 resorts are very unique because they're exempt and always have been, for a very long time. And so you've got other resorts in Queensland as well that are exempt. There's a whole list here, but you've got Hamilton Island, for example. So people do buy property on Hamilton Island. You've got Kingfisher Bay Resort over at Fraser Island. So that's also included. You've got Hyatt Regency Resort at Coolum. So there was a few that have been identified years ago as an integrated tourism resort and captured by this particular act. So I thought, look, it's good to mention that. We act for a lot of people overseas, as well as many Australians here wanting to buy property. And we do get these questions asked by agents still, that is this exemption still out there? Is it still available? It hasn't been revoked. And I say, yes, absolutely, it hasn't been revoked. I'd be highly surprised if it ever gets revoked. And it will always be there for these types of resorts as long as they're in existence. But it doesn't apply for a future resort. So if you wanted to buy a block of land and build a new tourism resort, this ship has sailed.
It has to be a resort that was established before 1999.
Prior to September 1999, and there were a couple that were established after that date that were captured with a couple of conditions. Yeah.
Now, Despina, you mentioned that the application fees will double. So it's up around the $14,000 mark. Now, if you're buying a multi-million-dollar unit or a multi-million-dollar part of one of these resorts, is 14 grand going to make much difference at all, really?
Well, you would think so in some respects, maybe, and not others. I mean, it depends on the value of what you're spending at the end of the day, because it does, the application fee does change depending on whether it's under $1 million, over $1 million. So it does fluctuate a little bit. The more you spend, the more you'll pay. Yeah, which I suppose it's a user pay system. So, you know, that makes sense, doesn't it? If you're going to tip in more, you've got to pay more. You know, it works with every tax, I suppose. And why should the foreign investors be any different to what we get slugged with as Australians in terms of, you know, all sorts of tax, stamp duty, land tax, capital gains tax, you know, income tax. It's all on a sliding scale. So it's the same application to foreign investors, which I think is a good thing. As to whether or not it's enough and whether or not it'll make a big dent into the economy for us, I don't know. Time will tell.
Time will tell. That's it. You're listening to Talking Law with Despina Priala. And if you own a property in Queensland and haven't paid land tax, or you're thinking about buying a property, this next segment is something that you have to listen to. Things are changing very soon, and details are coming up with Despina Priala on Radio 97.